month 8, and we have paper piecing this month, so don't panic. It's really quite simple, and we'll go through it step by step. One thing though I do want to say before we even get started is add a quarter tool. Once you have this in your toolbox, paper piecing becomes a cinch. Paper piecing is something I do when I don't want to have to think, and I just sit down and I just sew on the lines. It's really nice. So if you don't have an add a quarter tool and you think I can just measure that 1/4 inch, I recommend just spend the $13. It's well worth it. So that being said, we're going to have an actual demo where you can watch me cut, fold, okay? But right now we're just going to talk about paper piecing generally and the rest of the blocks that make this block go together. So the fellow that wrote the pattern, who says he hates paper piecing, he says to go by the mantra of fold, cut, sew, and press. That kind of makes sense to me. I see where he's going. But what I made up a long time ago when I learned to paper piece is place, sew, iron, trim. The reason I like this, I call it piece it, is because it reminds you of each step. Like, I never trim unless I've already ironed. And this is just in my brain, and you keep going around. Place, stitch, iron, trim, place, stitch, iron, trim. Okay? You gotta really get it in your brain. It's okay, and you're just following these same steps. You don't even have to think about it. Just follow the steps and it will work out. There are times that you're going to be doing this in here that you're going, this is not working. Well, we haven't got to the iron, open, and trim part maybe on that section. It does work. You just trust the process and you go each step. The next thing about paper piecing is you follow numerical order. It's very simple. On this particular pattern, this is piece 1. Your piece 1 is always face up. Just piece 1. Because everything is face to face, right? So piece 1 is always up. This is piece 2. That's the next piece I'm going to place. Okay? I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I am going to sew, iron it open, and trim. On this one there's not too much trimming. He does give you the 1/4 inch you need to sew these pieces together, so you're not trimming here on the inside of this block. You're trimming out here on the second line that's a 1/4 inch, and they're all that way. So on this one, piece 1, I placed it face up on the back of my pattern. I trimmed it. So what the add a quarter does is it gives me a natural 1/4 inch. So when I come back here and I sew, I know I'm always catching a 1/4 inch in my seam. It really simplifies it. Okay?
But you don't cut until after you sew.
Right. Right. So I ironed it open and I went ahead and trimmed the top and the side of this one. So the next one, I'm going to show you down here in a little bit a demo of how I place my second piece. And then on the more complicated block, this one, same process, but I'll show you how it works.
How do you get piece 1 to stay until you sew piece 2 on?
So some people recommend a little dab of glue. I don't like that because if you don't pull your paper off right away, it's going to glue the paper to it and then it's going to be crinkly in your quilt. If I'm worried about a piece moving at all, I'll pin the first piece. Basically, I've gotten so used to doing it that when I place this piece, I just naturally stick it under my machine this way and I'm just used to doing it. And then I start sewing out in my border and sew the whole way down. Okay, the second piece of this quilt are squares in a square. You're going to create 3 that have a colored inside, and you're going to create 3 that have your background color inside. So you're going to cut of your background 3, this happens to be my background 3 fabric, you are going to cut 12 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. You are going to cut 3 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares of your background 3, whatever that is for you. Then from fabric 2, 3, and 4, you're going to cut 4 each 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. They'll be on your background 3 right here. Out of fabric 6, 7, and 9, you're going to cut 1 each 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares. And these are going to be this. So you're going to draw a line diagonally on your 2.5 inch squares. There's a diagonal line. You're going to stitch it down, which I've already done on this side. I stitched it down, iron it open, and trim it to 1/4 inch. So when you get all 4 corners done, you're going to be creating a square and a square. This is something we've all done before. Okay, the other part of your sashing is also very, very simple. You're going to cut a whole lot of 2.5 inch squares. So you're going to take your background 1 minus the white, and you're going to cut 10 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. Out of fabrics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, 8 got left out. From 6 of those fabrics, you're going to cut 1 each 2.5 inch square. Then from the remaining 2 fabrics, you're going to cut 2 each 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. So you're going to have a total of 10 color squares. You're going to sew them together in a checkerboard pattern, as you'll see when I get you your patterns, for one of the sashing strips. Okay? So now we're going to go down onto the cutting mat here, and I will show you a little bit step by step of putting your paper piecing together. Okay, so paper piecing. Here's a great little paper piecing station because it has a place for me to cut and a place for me to iron. So my tools are something sharp, that I can fold the paper with.
Would the add a quarter work?
No, the add a quarter goes somewhere else. You can use anything here that isn't too thick.
Okay.
Okay, don't get like a 1/4 inch ruler because it's going to throw you off, but anything thin. So, what I'm going to do, this is a very simple one. So I placed my piece 1 and I placed my piece 2. Now here's a little trick. What's really important when you're working with triangles is you're going to need more fabric than you think. Okay? Because you're folding it over. So this kind of looks like it should pretty much fit. It's not a good example because it's not quite long enough. But what you're going to need is more fabric than you think you're going to need, because when you fold it over, you want to be sure you're catching all the way out to the edges here. Okay? Otherwise, I can show you how to fix it, but let's try and do it right. I have one there that I fixed. So if you don't come out here far enough, what I do is I end up gluing a piece under here to catch my 1/4 inch seam, and it never shows. But if you're cognizant to begin with of, okay, I'm at more of an angle than I think I am, I may need a bigger piece. So what I do with all my paper piecing scraps is I save them in a baggie till I'm done with my project, because it's amazing the little pieces you'll be able to use in paper piecing. So, placed my fabric, sewed the first piece on, ironed it open. Now I'm ready. So piece 1, piece 2. Now I'm ready to go to piece 3. So what I'm going to do is on the line, I know I'm doing piece 3 next. Put my add a quarter tightly up there. So it tells me exactly where I'm going to place my next piece. You never have to worry about it. So I'm going to place it. I am going to stitch it. I'm going to iron it open. And then I'm going to trim it. You're going to do that same process time after time, no matter how big the piece is or no matter how complicated it is. Even if you're doing like a mariner's compass, it's the same process.
And you trim it to the 1/4 inch line, not the inner line.
Trim it to the 1/4 inch line. So this is your 4 corners. It's a pretty simple piece. So we come to this one, and like I was telling you, this is going to look funny and it's going to look like it's not working. That's okay. You trust the process, okay? So what I did is I put my piece 1 down. A lot of times I'll start and just stick my piece 1 here 1/4 inch and not even trim my first cut because I'm so used to doing it. You get used to doing that. So for my piece 2, I was in a hurry this afternoon. Didn't look. So I trimmed on the piece 4 line. Can you see what I did? Mm-hmm. This is wrong. So what I should have done is trimmed right here. And placed my white piece right here. And that gives me the point I need. This is actually still going to work because when I put in piece 5, it's going to work. Sorry about that, but that shows you. You want to follow a progression. So for piece 3, when I got over here, I did it correctly. I did this. I did this, and I got from my piece 1 correctly. Placed this and sewed it, ironed it open. It's not trimmed yet. That's why it looks so funny. So I should have another triangle right here. And you could go ahead and pick this out and use this. But that's a great example. Give yourself a little bit of space. So trim between 1 and 2, then trim between 2 and 3, then trim between 1 and 2 and 4, like this, like I did on my 2-piece instead of my 4-piece. Am I confusing you all? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's start over. Let me get another.
You don't need to do it for me, girl, believe me.
Well, I want you to get it. I really want you to get it. So if this is here and I've ironed it open, and then I trim between these pieces, I'm still going to get the trim I need to put piece 4 in there. The instructions are pretty clear. What I would also suggest is, and I apologize that I didn't have that copied today, come back in. I know my printer prints true to 1 inch. I've calibrated it. Like Sherry brought something in today and we tested the 1 inch and it was like between 3/4 and 1 inch. It wasn't right at all. And it wouldn't have worked when she went to sew them back in. So I apologize. Everybody come in and go shopping in the next week and I'll give you these templates printed out. So if you're outside of Fort Bragg, be sure you test that 1 inch test square is really 1 inch.
Am I imagining it, or is it on one of our instruction pages, there's a 1 inch test cube?
There is a test
So you
cube.
can copy that and measure it?
And make sure
should
it's to scale, yeah.
The other product that's really good to have is the paper piecing paper, so you can put it in your printer, because then this goes.
So, since I blew it this time, you guys, I'll actually print these templates for you on paper piecing paper. Okay? He's also color coordinated. So, I actually changed, this called for red, and my red is very maroony and it's dark. So I changed this one. I actually wrote on my pattern, fabric 2, where this called for fabric 1. Okay?
One is the yellow.
So, if you don't like what he's said here, change it on your paper also, because it can get confusing and you will forget. So I will have these printed on an accurate copier on paper piecing paper for you. The only other issue is when you're putting your squares together, you want to be sure you have the right square color with the right paper piece. So I actually made these first because it was really clear what to do. Then I came back, I laid these squares out so they matched, and then I sewed these 4 squares together. And then I didn't have to rip them apart. Because you can get it, you know, messed up, yeah. So, tomorrow afternoon, 12 o'clock, I will have these available. And the templates will all be on paper piecing paper. And I will be available to help you actually walk through it with your fabrics. I do think once you've done 1 or 2, you're going to get it. Okay? So please don't hesitate to come in if you need some help. And you could see when you turn it around, if you trimmed it right, this is piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, piece 4, and piece 5. Same as this on here. Okay? So if you do decide to come in tomorrow, or Friday, or next Wednesday, bring your fabrics, because then I can work with you on it, and it'll make a lot more sense when you're able to be hands-on. It's really hard to teach this one, I think. This is one that's hard if you can't be at your machine and show what it's like when you're sewing. Okie doke? So, I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.